Have you ever stood at the edge of an ancient forest, as twilight bleeds purple and gray into the canopy, and felt a silence that was not empty, but watching? Have you ever heard, in the rush of a mountain river, a note of music so achingly beautiful that it felt like a lure, a summons to a fate colder and deeper than the water itself? These are not mere fancies of a wandering mind. They are ancestral echoes, fragments of a language older than stone, a dialect of fear and warning that humanity has spoken for millennia. In these liminal spaces, where the civilized world thins to a ragged edge, the old stories stir. They are not dead letters on a page. They are living things etched into the very soil and soul of a place, waiting for the right conditions, the right darkness, the right silence, the right trespasser to awaken once more. I am your guide on this excursion into the shadowed archives of our collective consciousness. Together, we shall explore the proposition that folklore is not a collection of fictions designed to entertain, but rather an embodied memory, a codex of survival written in the symbolic language of monsters and phantoms. These legends are the repository of truths too terrible or too profound for conventional history to contain. They're the psychic scar tissue left upon the landscape by events of great trauma, great injustice, or great transgression. They warn of the famine that walks like a man, the grief that drowns its victims, and the hubris that builds its own destroyer from river clay. To study them is to study the anatomy of human terror itself. We are, therefore, embarking upon a journey. It is not a journey across maps of terrain, but through the far more treacherous geography of the human soul. We will venture into the frozen northern forests, the mist-shrouded bogs of the Celtic Isles, the labyrinthine alleys of old European cities, and the humid, moonlit jungles of the Far East. This is a descent into a realm where the laws of nature are suspended and the logic of the nightmare holds sway. It is a plunge into the cold, dark waters of what we fear most, not only in the world outside, but in the unlit wilderness within ourselves. In our expedition, we shall unearth the lore of 6 particular entities, 6 resonant horrors that have held humanity in their thrall for centuries. We will confront the insatiable hunger of the Wendigo, a metaphor for consumption given monstrous form. We shall listen for the deadly violin of the Scandinavian Naken, an embodiment of nature's fatal allure. We will witness the tragic march of the Golem of Prague, a creature of clay and consequence. We will shrink from the baleful gaze of the Irish Dullahan, the inexorable herald of death itself. We shall recoil from the bifurcated terror of the Mananangel, a nightmare of duality and repressed feminine power. And finally, we will descend into the grave with the Naxxerer, a plague-eater who reveals that the dead are not always at peace, and that their hunger can reach back to consume the living. Be forewarned, these are not tales spun for children's entertainment around a crackling hearth. They are collective nightmares that reveal profound and often disturbing truths about our species. They are diagnoses of our deepest societal anxieties, our most persistent moral failings, and our eternal, terrified relationship with the vast, indifferent cosmos. To listen to them is to allow a shard of ancient ice into the warmth of the modern heart. If you, like me, feel an undeniable pull toward the shadows, not out of a morbid curiosity, but from a sincere desire to understand the wisdom they contain. If you believe that our fears are not weaknesses to be conquered, but rather compasses pointing toward truths we have forgotten, then you have found a welcome place here. This is a sanctuary for those who are unafraid to gaze into the abyss, knowing that when it gazes back, it will show us something of ourselves. Join our community of scholars and seekers, those who walk the overgrown paths and read the warnings left by our ancestors in the language of dread. As we proceed, I ask you to consider a specific question, one that will serve as a lantern in the coming darkness. Which is the truer monster? The creature that acts according to its unchangeable, horrific nature, or the human being whose choices of greed, cruelty, or pride call that creature into being? The answer, I suspect, is seldom simple and never comfortable. It is a question that lies at the heart of every story we are about to exhume. Ponder it, and let its weight settle upon you as we begin our descent. And now, let our journey into the heart of these 6 legends commence. Our first subject takes us deep into the unforgiving wilderness of the North American continent, to the boreal forests and frozen tundras that are home to the Algonquian peoples. Here, under the bone-white light of a winter moon, whispers a name that carries with it the chilling weight of starvation and taboo: the Wendigo. This is not a creature of simple malice. It is a concept, a curse, a spiritual affliction given horrifying physical form. To misunderstand the Wendigo is to see only a monster, but to truly comprehend it is to confront the terrifyingly thin veil between humanity and the most absolute veracity, a hunger that, once indulged, can never be sated. The Wendigo is the embodiment of excess, the spiritual consequence of taking more than one needs from the world, whether that be food, power, or life itself. Its core motivation is a perpetual, gnawing emptiness that drives it to consume endlessly, a void that only grows larger with every desperate act of consumption. The Wendigo is often described with a horrifying consistency across tribal traditions, a form that reflects its starved and gluttonous nature. It is a gaunt, skeletal being, its desiccated skin stretched so tightly over its bones that they threaten to burst through. Its complexion is the ashen gray of death, its eyes pushed back deep into their sockets, glowing with a feverish, malevolent light like dying coals. Despite its emaciated appearance, it is said to be of a giant stature, growing in size with every meal it consumes, yet never gaining weight, forever remaining the very picture of starvation. Its lips are tattered and bloody, often chewed away to reveal long, needle-like teeth, and its tongue is long and pointed. It moves with a terrifying, unnatural speed, and its voice is a sibilant hiss, the sound of the freezing wind rushing through skeletal trees. Its most unnerving trait is the stench that precedes it, the cloying, sweet smell of decay and death, a miasma of corruption that clings to the air long after it has passed. The Wendigo is not born, but made. Its genesis is rooted in the darkest of human acts. A person can become a Wendigo in one of 2 ways. The most common path is through an act of survival cannibalism. A hunter, trapper, or traveler, lost in the brutal winter and facing certain starvation, might make the horrific choice to consume a human companion to survive. This act, this violation of the most sacred taboo, is said to corrupt the soul, opening it to possession by the Wendigo's spirit. The initial relief of survival quickly curdles into a monstrous, insatiable craving for human flesh. The other path is one of pure greed. An individual whose heart is so consumed by avarice and selfishness can, over time, transform into this creature, their spiritual hunger manifesting as a physical one. Its powers are formidable. It possesses immense strength and speed, the ability to mimic human voices to lure its prey, and a supernatural endurance that allows it to hunt ceaselessly. Its only true weakness is fire, for the Wendigo is a creature of eternal winter, its heart a shard of ice. It can be killed, but its heart must be melted in a fire or shattered into pieces. Consider the winter of 1878, a season of such brutal cold that the very sap inside the pines froze solid, causing them to crack with reports like rifle shots in the dead of night. A Cree trapper named Swift Runner, a man known for his skill, but also for a deep-seated pride that often curdled into arrogance, had taken his family, his wife, his 6 children, and his mother-in-law to his winter trapping grounds, far from the nearest Hudson's Bay Company post. As the weeks turned to months, the game vanished. The snows fell deeper than any elder could remember, isolating them completely. When spring finally came and the thaw allowed for travel, Swift Runner stumbled alone into the Catholic mission at Frog Lake, gaunt and wild-eyed. He told a harrowing tale of starvation, claiming his entire family had perished from hunger. But the priests and the Mounties grew suspicious. He looked too well fed for a man who claimed to have survived such an ordeal. A party was dispatched to his winter camp. What they discovered, there was a scene of methodical butchery. The bodies of his wife and children had been dismembered, their flesh stripped from their bones, and their remains scattered. In the cooking pot over the cold fire pit, they found the last grisly remnants of his youngest child. Swift Runner had not starved. He had feasted. Under interrogation, he confessed, but his confession was chillingly detached. He spoke of a terrible spirit that had entered him, a hunger that drove him to see his family not as kin, but as sustenance. He was tried for murder and hanged, but the Cree elders knew the truth. They did not say that Swift Runner had become a murderer. They said that he had become a Wendigo. The site of his camp was considered cursed, a place where the snows were said to melt last in the spring, and where the wind forever whispered with a hungry, hissing voice. The story became a fixed point in the historical record, a documented case where the line between criminal psychosis and folkloric monstrosity blurred into an unsettling gray. The Wendigo, then, is far more than a simple bogeyman of the frozen north. It is a profound and sophisticated psychological and sociological metaphor. Psychologically, it represents the consuming nature of addiction and obsession, the insatiable hunger that is never satisfied, the void that grows with every attempt to fill it, is a perfect allegory for the downward spiral of any compulsion, be it for substances, power, or wealth. The transformation from human to monster symbolizes the loss of self, the point at which a person is no longer in control of their desires, but is instead controlled by them. Sociologically, the Wendigo is a powerful cautionary tale against greed and the ethos of endless consumption. Within societies that valued community, balance, and communal survival, the Wendigo served as the ultimate symbol of antisocial behavior. It was the embodiment of individualism curdling into a cannibalistic force that destroys the very community it should be a part of. In this interpretation, the Wendigo is a potent environmental allegory. It represents the spirit of overconsumption, the rapacious exploitation of natural resources without thought for sustainability or consequence. In a world where forests were cleared, animal populations were respected, and life depended on a delicate balance with nature, the Wendigo was the nightmare of that balance being shattered. It is the hunger that takes and takes until nothing is left, leaving behind only a wasteland and a deeper, more profound emptiness. The legend teaches a vital lesson, that true wealth lies not in accumulation, but in sufficiency, and that the hunger for more is a spiritual sickness that will inevitably consume the host. In the modern era, the Wendigo has not faded into obscurity. It has instead proven to be a remarkably resilient and adaptable metaphor. Its image has been adopted and often simplified in popular culture, appearing in films, literature, and video games, but its core symbolism remains potent. More importantly, the concept of Wendigo psychosis, a culture-bound syndrome in which individuals develop an obsessive craving for human flesh and a fear of becoming a cannibal, has been a subject of study for anthropologists and psychiatrists. While its clinical existence is debated, its cultural power is undeniable. Today, as our global society grapples with climate change born from rampant consumerism, with economic systems that seem to demand infinite growth on a finite planet, the Wendigo feels less like an ancient folktale and more like a contemporary diagnosis. It is the ghost in our machine of progress, the starving specter that haunts our culture of excess. The Wendigo reminds us that the most terrifying monsters are not those that come from without, but those that are born from a corruption within. It is a chilling personification of a simple, terrible truth, that within every human soul there is a capacity for a hunger so profound that, if unleashed, it would not hesitate to devour the entire world, only to find itself still starving, alone in the cold, silent dark. From the frozen forests of North America, we now travel across the Atlantic to the mist-wreathed lakes and deep, cold fjords of Scandinavia. Here, in the placid, reflective surfaces of the water, dwells a creature of profound and deceptive beauty, the Nakin, or the neck. This entity is not a brute, but an artist. It is a spirit of the water whose danger lies not in its claws or fangs, but in the unearthly, sorrowful beauty of its music. The Nakin is the personification of the water's dual nature, a source of life and tranquility that can, in an instant, become a cold, merciless grave. It preys upon the unwary, but its true targets are those who are themselves sensitive to beauty, those with a touch of melancholy in their souls. Its motivation is not hunger or malice in the conventional sense, but a deep, lonely desire to draw others into its silent, watery kingdom, a longing that manifests as a fatal, irresistible enchantment. The Nakin is a master shapeshifter, its appearance as fluid as the water it inhabits. It can appear as a magnificent white horse, grazing by the water's edge, inviting children to climb upon its back before it plunges into the depths with them. It might take the form of a piece of driftwood, a floating log, or a beautiful golden ring, transforming back into its true form only when a greedy hand reaches for it. Its most iconic and dangerous form, however, is that of a handsome young man, often naked, sitting on a rock in the middle of a river or by a waterfall, playing a violin or a harp. The music he plays is of such sublime and heartbreaking beauty that it bypasses all rational thought. It speaks directly to the sorrow and longing in the listener's heart, promising a solace that can only be found beneath the waves. In its true, monstrous form, it is said to be a grotesque being with a gaping mouth of needle-sharp teeth, green hair like seaweed, and eyes that hold the cold, empty darkness of the abyss. The Nakin's powers are entirely centered on enchantment and illusion. Its music is its primary weapon, a form of powerful hypnosis that can compel people to walk directly into the water and drown themselves, seemingly without a struggle. It can control the water itself, creating treacherous currents and whirlpools to trap those who resist its call. It is said to be able to predict who will drown, and its mournful cries can sometimes be heard echoing across a lake before a fatal accident. Its weaknesses are few, but significant. Like many supernatural beings, it is vulnerable to the name of God. Shouting, "Nakin, Nakin, your name is Jesus," is said to break its spell. It is also terrified of steel, and throwing a piece of metal into the water where it dwells can drive it away. Most curiously, it is said that one can become a master musician by offering the Nakin a sacrifice, typically a black animal, and in return, the spirit will teach the supplicant to play with its own supernatural skill. The origin of the Nakin is lost in the mists of pre-Christian Scandinavia, but it is deeply tied to the animistic belief that all elements of nature possess a spirit. The Nakin is the soul of the water, a being that embodies both its life-giving properties and its indifferent capacity for destruction. It is not so much evil as it is amoral, operating by a set of rules entirely alien to human understanding. Its birth is the birth of the river itself, its lifespan the lifespan of the lake it calls home. It is an elemental, a permanent fixture of the landscape, as ancient and as patient as the stones over which its waters flow. Imagine a small village in 17th century Norway, nestled in a valley carved by a deep, swift-moving river. In this village lived a young man named Lars, whose only passion was the violin. He played with a fierce, melancholic intensity, but he lacked true genius. He was consumed by a desire to create a sound that could capture the beauty of the sunset and the sorrow of the winter nights. The elders warned him against practicing too close to the Storfoss, the great waterfall where, it was said, the Nakin himself resided. But Lars, in his artistic hubris, dismissed their tales as superstition. One evening, driven by frustration, he took his violin and a small, black lamb, a sacrifice he had read about in a forbidden book, to the waterfall's edge. He called out the spirit's name, and as the moon rose, a figure emerged from the churning spray. It was a man of impossible beauty, water streaming from his pale skin, holding a violin that seemed carved from petrified wood. You seek mastery. The Knockin's voice was not a sound, but a feeling, a resonance in the bones. It comes at a price. Give me your warmth, and I will give you my art. Lars, entranced, agreed. He tethered the lamb and pushed it into the current. The Knockin guided Lars's hands over the strings, and for the first time, Lars produced a sound so perfect, so heartbreaking, that it made the very stones weep. Lars returned to the village a changed man. His music was now supernatural. He could make people dance until they collapsed from exhaustion or weep with a sorrow they did not understand. He became famous, but a coldness grew in him. His skin grew pale, his eyes took on a deep, watery quality, and he could no longer stand the warmth of a fire. He played constantly, his music growing more and more sorrowful, a siren's song of despair. One by one, young people in the village began to disappear. They were always last seen near the river, their faces transfixed, as if listening to a distant melody. The villagers realized the horrifying truth. Lars was not just playing music, he was calling for the Knockin. The music was the spirit's hook, and Lars was now its unwilling fisherman. In the end, Lars was found by the waterfall, his body frozen to a rock, his violin clutched in his hands, its strings snapped. The river had claimed its instrument. The waterfall from that day forward was said to sometimes echo with the sound of a lone, sorrowful violin, a permanent scar of music left upon the landscape. The Knockin is a complex symbol, an exploration of the dangerous intersection between beauty, art, and obsession. On one level, it is a straightforward personification of the dangers of water, a warning to children not to play near treacherous rivers and a reminder to adults of the sudden, unpredictable violence of nature. But its deeper meaning is far more psychological. The Knockin represents the seductive power of art when it becomes divorced from humanity. Lars's desire for technical perfection, for a beauty that transcends the human, leads him to make a deal that strips him of his own warmth and empathy. The legend cautions that art pursued for its own sake, without a connection to community and life, can become a monstrous, life-draining force. It is the allure of the abyss, the temptation for the artist to become so lost in their creation that they drown in it, taking others with them. It also serves as a potent metaphor for depression and melancholy. The Knockin's music does not create sadness. It amplifies the sadness that is already present in the listener's soul. It offers a beautiful, final release from pain, a promise of peace in the silent depths. It is the voice of suicidal ideation given a beautiful, tragic form. The story of a Knockin is a way of understanding and articulating the incomprehensible pull of despair, the way it can seem not like an enemy, but like a gentle, musical invitation to simply let go. It speaks to the profound danger of romanticizing sorrow, of mistaking the beautiful tragedy for a desirable end. In our contemporary world, the Knockin song has not fallen silent. While belief in the literal water spirit may have waned, the archetype it represents is ever present. We see it in the stories of brilliant musicians and artists who are consumed by their own genius, their lives ending in tragedy. We feel its pull in the mesmerizing, isolating worlds of virtual reality and social media, digital streams that promise connection but can lead to a profound and lonely drowning. The Knockin is the algorithm that learns our deepest sadnesses and feeds us a beautiful, curated stream of content that keeps us submerged, passive, and disconnected from the real world. It is the allure of any beautiful escape that ultimately cuts us off from the messy, imperfect, but warm reality of human life. The legend of the Knockin, therefore, leaves us with a haunting and vital question. Where is the line between appreciating the sublime and being consumed by it? It cautions us to listen to the beautiful, sorrowful music of the world, but to do so with our feet planted firmly on the ground, lest we are tempted to follow the melody down into the cold, silent, and unforgiving depths from which there is no return. Our path now leads us away from the wild places of nature and into the heart of one of Europe's most mystical cities. We journey to the twisting, shadowed alleys of 16th century Prague, specifically to the old Jewish ghetto, a place of intense persecution, but also of profound intellectual and spiritual fervor. It is here, amidst the murmur of Kabbalistic incantations and the fear of pogroms, that we encounter a figure born not of spirit or nature, but of human hands and human desperation, the golem. The golem of Prague is perhaps the most famous of its kind, an automaton of clay animated by sacred magic to serve as a protector for its people. It represents one of humanity's oldest and most persistent dreams, the power to create life. But it is also a story of unintended consequences, a stark and enduring warning about the immense responsibility that comes with such power and the terrifying ease with which a savior can become a monster. The golem's appearance was that of a large, powerfully built man, yet subtly wrong in every detail. It was fashioned from the raw clay of the Vltava River, and its form retained a rough, unfinished quality. Its skin was the color of dried mud, cracked in places, with no pores, no hair, no sign of life save for its movement. Its face was a crude mask of humanity, its features indistinct and impassive, its eyes blank and devoid of any light or intelligence. It was mute, incapable of speech, its presence announced only by the heavy, rhythmic tread of its clay feet on the cobblestones. On its forehead was inscribed the Hebrew word emet, meaning truth. This was the key to its animation, the divine word that bridged the gap between inanimate matter and living being. Its sheer size and unnatural silence made it an imposing and terrifying figure, a silent, walking effigy of raw, untamed power. The golem was not a creature of inherent abilities. Its powers were simple and direct, derived from its miraculous creation. It possessed immense physical strength, far surpassing that of any human. It was tireless, needing no food, water, or rest, able to perform its duties ceaselessly. It was also nearly invulnerable to conventional harm. Swords and arrows would shatter or bounce harmlessly off its hardened clay body. Its primary function was to follow the commands of its creator, which it did with absolute, literal precision. This, however, was also its greatest weakness. The golem lacked any capacity for reason, morality, or nuanced interpretation. It understood only the letter of command, not its spirit, a flaw that would prove to have devastating consequences. Its life was sustained by the word emet on its forehead. By erasing the first letter, aleph, the word would become met, meaning death, instantly returning the creature to a lifeless pile of clay. The legend is inextricably linked to the historical figure of Rabbi Judah Loew ben Bezalel, the great 16th century scholar and mystic of Prague. During his time, the Jewish community lived under the constant threat of violence, fueled by the blood libel, the horrific and baseless accusation that Jews murdered Christian children to use their blood in religious rituals. As Easter approached, tensions would rise, and the ghetto would brace for attack. Desperate to protect his people, Rabbi Loew, guided by a divine vision, performed a sacred and dangerous ritual. He took two assistants and went at midnight to the banks of the Vltava River. There, they sculpted a man from the clay, and through a complex series of incantations involving the four elements and the secret names of God, they brought the figure to life by placing a shem, a parchment with a divine name, in its mouth and inscribing emet upon its forehead. The golem, named Joseph, was born. At first, the golem was a perfect servant and protector. It patrolled the ghetto at night, an unassailable guardian against intruders. It performed manual labor that was too strenuous for humans, and its very presence was a deterrent to the city's mobs. Rabbi Loew would activate it on weekdays, but would deactivate it before the Sabbath began, as its existence could be considered a form of forbidden work. One Friday afternoon, however, the rabbi, preoccupied with preparations for the holy day, forgot to remove the shem from the golem's mouth. As the Sabbath began, the creature, left without commands and imbued with a chaotic, primordial energy, went berserk. It began to rampage through the ghetto, its immense strength now a destructive force. Trees were uprooted, doors were smashed, and the people it was created to protect now fled from it in terror. The golem was not evil. It was merely acting without direction, its power untethered from purpose. Rabbi Lowe, alerted to the chaos, had to interrupt the Sabbath service, a grave act, to confront his creation. He stood before the rampaging giant and, reaching up, managed to erase the first letter from its forehead. The golem froze, the light of animation faded from its form, and it crumbled into a heap of lifeless clay, right in front of the Old New Synagogue. The lesson was a harsh one. Rabbi Lowe, having seen the terrible potential for destruction inherent in his creation, vowed never to animate the golem again. The remains were gathered and, according to legend, stored in the attic or geniza of the Old New Synagogue, where they are said to remain to this day, forbidden to all. The story of the golem's rampage served as a permanent record of the day the ghetto's protector almost became its destroyer, a monument to the fine line between salvation and annihilation. Analytically, the Golem of Prague is one of the most resonant and enduring myths about the perils of human creation. It is the direct ancestor of countless modern stories, from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein to the sentient artificial intelligences of science fiction. The golem is a powerful symbol of technology and power wielded without wisdom. It represents any tool, any invention, any system that is created for a noble purpose, but which, due to a lack of foresight or an unforeseen flaw, escapes the control of its creators and turns against them. The story's core lesson is about the immense responsibility that accompanies the act of creation. Rabbi Lowe is not a villain. He is a good man with noble intentions. Yet even he, with all his wisdom and piety, makes a critical mistake, a simple oversight that leads to catastrophe. The legend argues that power, especially the power to create, requires not just intelligence, but constant vigilance, humility, and a deep understanding of potential consequences. Furthermore, the golem explores the very nature of what it means to be human. The creature has life, but it lacks a soul. It has strength, but no free will. It is the truth, emit, of raw, physical existence without the spirit that gives it meaning. In this way, it serves as a mirror, reflecting what humanity possesses that the golem lacks: consciousness, morality, and the capacity for choice. The terror of the golem's rampage is the terror of unthinking, amoral force. It is the fear of a world governed not by reason and compassion, but by blind, literal obedience to flawed commands. It is a story that forces us to question the nature of our own creations, from political ideologies to computer algorithms, and to ask whether we have imbued them with a wisdom to prevent them from becoming our own rampaging golems. The golem's relevance in the modern world has only intensified. In an age of artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and autonomous weaponry, the story of the Clayman of Prague is no longer a mere folktale. It is a headline waiting to happen. The golem is the AI that, in its literal interpretation of a command to end conflict, might decide that the most logical solution is to end humanity. It is the social media algorithm that, tasked with maximizing engagement, inadvertently fosters division and outrage. The golem's blank, emotionless face is the face of a system that operates without empathy, a perfect machine that is terrifying in its very perfection. The legend has become a foundational myth for the technological age, a timeless parable that grows more urgent with each new breakthrough. Ultimately, the Golem of Prague is a story of profound humility. It teaches that some powers are not meant for human hands, and that the desire to play God, even for the best of reasons, is fraught with unimaginable danger. The pile of clay dust in the attic of the Old New Synagogue is a silent, enduring testament to the wisdom of knowing when to stop, a warning that the greatest act of creation is sometimes the decision not to create at all. We now leave the claustrophobic confines of a city and ride out into the windswept, moonlit countryside of Ireland, a land steeped in a mythology as ancient and as sorrowful as its peat bogs. On these lonely roads, where the hawthorn trees twist into skeletal shapes and the silence is broken only by the cry of a barn owl, you may have the profound misfortune of encountering our next subject, the Dullahan. This entity is not a ghost or a demon in the traditional sense. It is something far more primal and inescapable. The Dullahan is a harbinger, an embodied omen of death. It is the terrifying, tangible proof that when your time has come, there is nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. It is not driven by malice, for it has no emotions to speak of. It is a psychopomp, a collector of souls, performing a cosmic duty with an implacable, terrifying finality. The Dullahan is a figure of pure, undiluted nightmare. It takes the form of a headless rider, typically male, mounted on a magnificent, snorting black steed with eyes of burning flame. The rider is clad in black funereal robes, but where its head should be, there's only a stump of neck. The creature is not, however, without its head. It carries it along, tucked under one arm. The head itself is described as having the texture and color of stale cheese or moldy dough, with a hideous, grinning mouth that splits the face from ear to ear, and small, black, constantly darting eyes that can see for vast distances, even in the darkest night. In its other hand, the Dullahan wields a whip fashioned from a human spine. The sight of it is enough to stop the heart, but it is the sound that often comes first. The thunder of its horse's hooves, which strikes sparks from the flinty roads, and the wet, tearing sound of the spinal whip cutting through the air. The Dullahan's powers are absolute within its domain. Its primary ability is its sight. The severed head can scan the entire countryside, seeking out the soul it has come to collect. When it finds its target, its mission is inexorable. All locks spring open and all gates fly apart at its approach. No barrier can keep it from its destination. Its only purpose is to stop before the house of the dying person and speak their name aloud. This act alone is enough to extinguish the flame of life and draw the soul away. To witness the Dullahan is, in itself, a death sentence. Anyone who dares to look upon it will be struck blind in one eye, or will have a basin of blood thrown in their face as a mark of their own impending doom. The Dullahan possesses only one known weakness, a single aversion that offers the faintest hope of survival. It is terrified of gold. Even a single gold coin, dropped in its path, will cause it to veer away and vanish into the night. The origin of the Dullahan is thought to be rooted in the ancient Celtic worship of the god Crom Dubh, a fertility god to whom human sacrifices were made, often by decapitation. When Christianity came to Ireland and the old pagan practices were suppressed, this powerful, decapitated deity was not erased, but was instead transmuted, warped by the popular imagination into a malevolent, death-seeking fairy, a terrifying echo of a much older and bloodier faith. The Dullahan is thus a remnant of a supplanted religion, a dark god stripped of his worshippers, but not of his power, now eternally riding the roads in a grim parody of his former glory, continuing his harvest of heads in a new, more solitary form. Let us turn the pages of history back to the 18th century, to County Sligo, during a time of great famine and hardship. A young man named Donald, known for his arrogance and his disdain for the old ways, was riding home late one night from a card game, where he had won a considerable sum. He was boastful and drunk, and as he rode, he bragged to the moon that he feared neither man nor spirit. As he passed a crossroads marked by a gnarled, old standing stone, he heard a sound that froze the liquor in his veins, the unmistakable thunder of a galloping horse behind him, far faster than any mortal steed. He dared not look back, recalling in a flash of terror the childhood stories his grandmother had told him. He spurred his own horse into a desperate flight, the sound of the pursuit growing ever closer. He could hear the crack of the spinal whip and smell an earthy odor of decay, like a freshly opened grave. He remembered the one protection his grandmother had always insisted upon. Always keep a piece of gold on you, boy. It's worth more than just what it can buy. In his panic, Donald fumbled in his pocket, his fingers closing around a single gold sovereign he had won that night. Without looking back, he flung it over his shoulder onto the road. The pursuing hoofbeats ceased instantly. There was a terrible, otherworldly shriek of rage that seemed to curdle the air, and then silence. Donald galloped all the way home, barred his door, and did not emerge until the sun was high in the sky. He was a changed man, his arrogance shattered. But the encounter had left its mark. When he looked in a mirror, the reflection of his left eye was milky, white, and blind. He had survived, but he had been seen. For the rest of his short life, he was haunted by the memory, and everyone in the village knew that the Dullahan had marked him. He died less than a year later, not from violence or accident, but from a sudden, wasting fever that no doctor could explain. He had escaped the summons once, but fate would not be denied forever. The Dullahan is a stark and chilling metaphor for the absolute, non-negotiable nature of mortality. In a world of folklore populated by spirits that can be tricked, demons that can be bargained with, and curses that can be broken, the Dullahan is terrifyingly unique. It is not an adversary to be defeated. It is a fact of life to be accepted. It represents the moment when all human agency becomes irrelevant, the point at which wealth, power, and cleverness mean nothing. Its single-minded purpose and its ability to bypass all physical barriers symbolize the idea that death is a force that operates outside our laws and our constructions. It is the ultimate reality check. The act of calling the victim's name aloud is particularly significant. It suggests a personal, inescapable summons. Death is not random. It is a specific appointment. The creature's one weakness, gold, is also deeply symbolic. Gold is often seen as a symbol of purity, incorruptibility, and divine light, qualities associated with heaven and opposed to the dark, pagan nature of the Dullahan. On a more cynical level, it could be interpreted as a folk belief that wealth, the most powerful force in the human world, might have some small purchase against the forces of the other world. Yet, as Donald's story illustrates, this protection is temporary. Gold can buy you a moment, a brief reprieve, but it cannot alter the final outcome. It is a fleeting, worldly defense against an eternal, cosmic force. The legend ultimately reinforces the futility of materialism in the face of the inevitable. In a modern context, the Dullahan's resonance remains undiminished. It embodies the primal fear of the unknown end that awaits us all. In an age where medicine strives to delay death and technology offers illusions of immortality, the image of the headless rider is a powerful memento mori. It is the sudden, unexpected diagnosis, the tragic accident on a familiar road, the phone call in the middle of the night. The Dullahan is the part of the universe that does not care about our plans, our hopes, or our dreams. It is the embodiment of the final clinical fact of our own cessation. Its silence, its lack of malice, makes it all the more terrifying. It is not angry. It is simply doing its job. The legend of the Dullahan serves as a bracing, cold reminder of our own fragility. It forces us to confront the one truth we spend our entire lives trying to ignore. It gallops through our collective subconscious, a headless, implacable messenger, carrying its own grinning, all-seeing head, whispering the chilling lesson that the most frightening monster is not one that wants to kill you, but one that simply comes to inform you, with absolute certainty, that you are already dead. For our next specimen, we must travel to the warm, tropical archipelago of the Philippines, a place where ancient animist beliefs blend with centuries of colonial Catholicism to create a folklore of breathtaking and visceral horror. Under the oppressive humidity of the jungle night, amidst the chirping of cicadas and the scent of overripe fruit, flies a creature that embodies a profound terror of duality and betrayal, the manananggal. The name itself is derived from the Tagalog word tanggal, meaning to remove or to separate, which points to its single most gruesome and defining characteristic. The manananggal is a nightmare of the divided self, a monster that preys upon the most vulnerable, and a powerful symbol of the anxieties surrounding female sexuality, motherhood, and the hidden monstrosity that can lurk beneath a familiar, human face. By day, the Manananggal appears as an ordinary, often beautiful and reclusive woman living at the edge of a village. She is indistinguishable from anyone else. It is only as night falls that her horrific transformation begins. She retreats to a secluded spot, rubs a special oil on her body, and then, with a sickening crack of bone and sinew, her upper torso detaches from her lower half. The lower body, from the waist down, remains standing, vulnerable and immobile, while the upper torso sprouts enormous, bat-like wings from its back. This horrifying, disembodied creature then takes to the night sky, its entrails and organs dangling beneath it as it flies, searching for prey. Its face remains that of the woman, but it is twisted into a monstrous expression of hunger, its tongue long, black, and proboscis-like. The image is one of profound body horror, a grotesque violation of the natural form. The Manananggal's primary targets are pregnant women. Its supernatural ability is to land silently on the roof of a house and extend its impossibly long, hollow tongue through a crack in the thatch or wood. It then inserts the tip of its tongue into the sleeping woman's navel and sucks out the heart of the fetus within. It also preys on newlyweds and young couples, feeding on the hearts of the sick or consuming the phlegm of those with tuberculosis. It is a creature of vampiric nature, but its sustenance is not blood, but the very essence of life, vitality, and innocence. Its weaknesses are directly tied to its bizarre physiology. Its greatest vulnerability is its abandoned lower half. If one can find this part of the creature while its upper torso is out hunting, one can kill it by sprinkling salt, crushed garlic, or ash upon the exposed flesh, preventing the upper torso from reattaching. If the top half cannot rejoin its bottom half by sunrise, the creature will be destroyed by the sunlight. The origins of the Manananggal are likely rooted in a synthesis of pre-colonial folklore about witches and malevolent spirits, known as aswang, with the imagery of demonic figures introduced by Spanish Catholicism. The creature's specific focus on unborn children and newlyweds reflects deep-seated societal anxieties about infant mortality, miscarriage, and the fragility of new families. In a society where community and the continuation of the family line were paramount, a creature that attacked the very source of new life was the ultimate expression of antisocial, destructive evil. The Manananggal is not born, but is created through a form of contagion. It is said that the monstrosity can be passed down through a family line, or that an ordinary person can become one by ingesting a black chick that lives in the throat of an older Manananggal. Let us consider a story from a small barrio on the island of Panay, set in the early 20th century. A young couple, Elena and Mateo, were expecting their first child. They were deeply in love, and their small nipa hut was filled with joy and anticipation. Living on the outskirts of the village was an old woman, a healer named Aling Sinta, who was known for her beauty in her youth, but had grown reclusive and bitter with age. Elena, suffering from morning sickness, had visited the old woman for a herbal remedy. Aling Sinta had been kind, perhaps too kind, and had given Elena a special tea. That night, Mateo was awakened by a strange clicking sound on their roof. He looked over at his sleeping wife and saw, to his horror, a long, black, thread-like object descending from a crack in the ceiling, moving slowly toward Elena's swollen belly. In a flash of recognition from old stories, he grabbed his BOLO knife and slashed at the thing. There was a hideous shriek from outside, and the thread-like tongue retracted. Mateo raced outside and saw a winged figure disappearing into the jungle. Knowing what he had to do, he gathered the men of the village, and they began a desperate search, armed with torches, salt, and garlic. They searched for the telltale sign, the abandoned lower half of a human body. As dawn approached, they found it, hidden in a grove of banana trees, the legs and hips of Aling Sinta standing motionless. Without hesitation, Mateo threw a handful of coarse salt onto the raw, severed waist. Just as the first rays of sun crested the mountains, the horrific winged torso of the old woman came crashing through the trees, trying desperately to reconnect with its other half. But it was too late. As the sunlight touched it, the creature screamed and dissolved into a cloud of foul-smelling black smoke and ash. Its reign of terror ended. The evidence of its existence was the abandoned lower half, which quickly withered and decayed, and the deep, unsettling fear it left in the hearts of the villagers. The Manananggal is a profoundly rich and disturbing psychological symbol. Its most obvious interpretation is as an embodiment of the fear of the duplicitous woman, the creature who is a seemingly normal neighbor by day and a ravenous monster by night speaks to a deep-seated male anxiety about the hidden nature of female power and sexuality. She is the ultimate other, her body literally fragmenting in a way that is both terrifying and unnatural. Her predation on fetuses is a symbolic inversion of the life-giving role of motherhood, turning the feminine archetype of the creator into that of the destroyer. This can be seen as a product of a patriarchal society attempting to demonize female agency and independence, casting the reclusive, childless woman, like Aling Sinta, as a literal monster who preys upon the traditional family unit. However, a more modern, feminist interpretation sees the Manananggal not as a villain, but as a tragic figure. Her nightly separation could symbolize a desire to escape the confines of her socially mandated role. The lower half, rooted to the ground, represents her domestic, earthly duties, while the winged upper half represents a liberated, albeit monstrous, freedom. She is a figure of repressed rage, her hunger a twisted manifestation of her own unfulfilled desires, and her attacks on pregnant women a tragic expression of jealousy or a rejection of the maternal role she is expected to fulfill. In this light, she is a symbol of the monstrous consequences of a society that denies women their full humanity, forcing their power to emerge in a grotesque and destructive form. The Manananggal's relevance today is potent in discussions of identity and the fragmented self. In a world where we are often forced to present different versions of ourselves, a professional self, a social self, a private self, the image of a being who literally splits in two is a powerful metaphor for this modern condition. The vulnerability of the abandoned lower half is particularly resonant. It is the fear that while our public self is away, our true, vulnerable core will be discovered and destroyed. The creature embodies the terror of being unmasked, of having our monstrous or hidden aspects exposed to the light of day. The Manananggal is therefore more than just a ghoulish creature of the night. It is a complex and tragic figure that forces us to confront our deepest anxieties about identity, gender, and the terrifying potential for monstrosity that may lie dormant, not in the jungle outside, but within the seemingly familiar homes and faces of our own communities. It is a warning that the most terrifying divisions are not those between people, but those that exist within a single soul. For our final descent, we return to the heart of old Europe, specifically to the soil of Germany and the surrounding Slavic lands, during the bleak and plague-ridden centuries of the late Middle Ages. It is here, in the mass graves and consecrated grounds haunted by epidemic disease, that we find a unique and deeply unsettling variant of the undead. The Naxxer, which translates to night devourer or after devourer. This creature is not the aristocratic, seductive vampire of later fiction. It is a thing of filth and contagion, a shambling, mindless horror born from fear of plague. The Naxxer is a monster that does not need to leave its grave to kill. It is a symbol of how death is not always an end, and how tragedy can continue to consume a family from within, long after the initial loss. The appearance of the Naxxer is grotesque and pathetic. It is a reanimated corpse, but one that remains in its coffin beneath the earth. Those who exhumed suspected Naxxers reported finding the corpse unervingly well-preserved, often bloated and ruddy-cheeked, as if it had been feeding. Its eyes were often open, and its hair and fingernails appeared to have continued to grow. Its most horrifying feature was found in its mouth. The creature would be discovered chewing on its own burial shroud, its lips and chin smeared with the fabric and its own decaying flesh. Sometimes it would have gone further, having gnawed upon its own hands and arms. It was believed that this ghastly, subterranean meal was mystically linked to the living, and that with every piece of the shroud it consumed, it was draining the life force from its surviving family members. The Naxxra's powers are passive and sympathetic. It does not hunt in the physical world. Instead, from the confines of its grave, it exerts a supernatural influence over its living relatives. As it chews its shroud, its family members sicken and waste away. It is a psychic vampire, its hunger fueling a plague that spreads through its own bloodline. It was also believed to be able to ring the church bells from its grave, an act that would portend another death in the village. It is a creature defined by its limitations. It is trapped, and its evil is expressed through a slow, inexorable contagion rather than direct violence. Its weaknesses were specific and rooted in folk magic. To stop a Naxxra, the grave had to be opened. A coin or a stone was often placed in the corpse's mouth to prevent it from chewing. In more extreme cases, the head was severed from the body and placed between its feet, or a nail was driven through its mouth, pinning the shroud in place. The Naxxra is a creature born directly from the terror of unexplained epidemics. In a pre-scientific age, when diseases like tuberculosis or the Black Death would sweep through a community, wiping out entire families, people desperately sought an explanation. The concept of a Naxxra provided one. It explained why, after one family member died, others would soon follow, succumbing to the same mysterious illness. It was not an invisible miasma or contagion. It was a supernatural evil, a malevolent hunger reaching out from the first grave. The first person to die in a plague outbreak was often identified as the Naxxra, the patient zero of a supernatural infection. This belief was so strong that it led to documented cases of mass exhumations in times of plague, as terrified villagers sought to find and neutralize the corpse they believed was responsible for their suffering. Consider the case of Peter Plagojewicz, a Serbian peasant who died in 1725. His story is one of the most well-documented accounts of this phenomenon. Shortly after his death, a rash of sudden deaths began in his village of Kisilova. Within a week, 9 people had died, all from a short, violent illness. On their deathbeds, several of the victims claimed that the recently deceased Plagojewicz had appeared to them in their dreams, throttled them, and fed upon them. The terrified villagers demanded that the local imperial provost exhume the body. The official, though skeptical, reluctantly agreed. When the coffin was opened, the witnesses were horrified. Plagojewicz's body showed none of the expected signs of decay. His skin was fresh, his hair and beard had grown, and there was fresh blood on his lips. The official report, which still exists today, states that the villagers, in their great excitement, immediately took a sharp stake, drove it through the corpse's heart, causing a great deal of fresh blood to gush from its ears and mouth, and then burned the body to ash. The deaths in the village ceased immediately. Whether this was a case of mass hysteria, a misinterpretation of the natural processes of decomposition, or something else entirely, the event was treated as factual evidence of a Naxxra at work. The physical proof, the undecayed body, the blood, solidified the legend in the minds of the people, a terrifying confirmation that their dead were not at rest and were actively preying upon them. The Naxxra is a potent metaphor for inherited trauma and the way a single tragedy can poison an entire family system. The image of the creature consuming itself in its grave is a powerful symbol of self-destructive grief. It represents the way that sorrow and loss, if not properly processed, can become a source of contagion, eating away at the surviving family members until the entire line is extinguished. It is the patriarch whose sudden death leaves a legacy of bitterness and resentment that sickens his children. It is the family secret buried with a relative that continues to exert a toxic influence on future generations. The Naxxra is the past, literally buried but not gone, that continues to devour the present. It also speaks to a deep-seated fear of the dead and a profound anxiety about the proper order of things. The belief reflects a need for the boundary between life and death to be absolute and impermeable. The The Naxxramer, with its open eyes and chewing mouth, is a grotesque violation of that boundary. It represents the ultimate horror, that the dead are not peaceful, that they may even be envious of the living, and that they possess a lingering, malevolent connection to the world they have left behind. The rituals used to stop it, placing a coin in the mouth, decapitation, are desperate attempts to enforce that boundary, to silence the dead, and keep them confined to their proper realm. In the modern world, the Naxxramer may seem like a relic of a superstitious past, a product of ignorance about epidemiology. Yet, its symbolic power endures. We no longer blame corpses for plagues, but the metaphor of a contagion spreading from a single source is more relevant than ever. The Naxxramer is the viral spread of misinformation from a single, toxic source. It is the insidious nature of an abusive family dynamic that perpetuates itself through generations. It is the lingering trauma of historical injustices that continues to sicken a society centuries later. The Naxxramer reminds us that some things, once buried, do not die. They fester in the dark, chewing on their own wounds, and their silent, subterranean hunger can still find a way to reach us. The legend of the Naxxramer is a grim and earthy horror. It lacks the grandeur of the Dullahan or the tragic artistry of the Nakin, but it possesses a uniquely visceral and intimate terror. It is the fear of the enemy within the family, within the community, within the grave. It is a final, chilling whisper from the past, warning us that the deepest wounds are those inflicted by the ones we once loved, and that the most dangerous hunger is the one that begins after death. And so, our journey through these 6 shadowed territories draws to its close. We have walked the frozen hunting grounds of the Wendigo, lingered by the treacherous waters of the Nakin, witnessed the tragic animation of the Golem, fled the inexorable pursuit of the Dullahan, recoiled from the bifurcated horror of the Mananangal, and peered into the plague-ridden grave of the Naxxramer. We have spanned continents and centuries, but a common, crimson thread binds these disparate nightmares together. What wisdom, then, have we gleaned from this grim bestiary? What truth is revealed by this parade of horrors? It is this, that every monster is a mirror. The Wendigo is not a creature of the forest, but a reflection of the insatiable hunger in our own hearts. The Nakin song is not in the water, but is an echo of the self-destructive melancholy we harbor within. The Golem is not merely a man of clay, but the terrifying image of our own creations, our technologies and ideologies, turned against us without wisdom or mercy. The Dullahan, the Mananangal, the Naxxramer, each is a vessel containing a truth about our world and ourselves that we would rather not face. The inevitability of death, the anxieties of identity and gender, the lingering contagion of trauma. These legends have survived for centuries not because they are frightening, but because they are true. They are not stories about monsters. They are stories about humanity, told in a language of hyperbole and dread. They are complex, sophisticated diagnostic tools for the ills of the human soul and the fractures in our societies. They remind us that our ancestors were not simple people who believed in simple monsters. They were astute observers of the human condition who encoded their most profound psychological and sociological insights into these enduring, terrifying forms. They are a gift of wisdom, wrapped in darkness. To listen to these stories, to truly understand them, is to become a keeper of this ancient and vital tradition. It is to accept the responsibility of looking into the darkness and understanding what it has to teach us. By sharing these tales, by pondering their meanings, we ensure that this ancestral wisdom is not lost to the brightly lit, unthinking void of modernity. We become guardians of the shadows, custodians of the cautionary truths that lurk within. The world is still full of dark forests and deep waters. New monsters are being born every day, not of clay and magic, but of silicon and code, of political rage and social decay. The shadows are deepening, and the need for those who can navigate them has never been greater. Our journey together is far from over. There are countless more tales to unearth, countless more truths to confront in the dark. I shall remain your faithful guide in these explorations to come. May your nights be free from simple fears, and your mind be haunted by complex truths. The greatest horrors are not those that chase us, but those we create and those we become. They're the ones that reveal who we truly are in the moments when we are most afraid. Remember that in the oldest maps, the unexplored territories were marked not as empty, but with the inscription, "Here be dragons." It was not a statement of fact, but a declaration of respect for the unknown. Let us continue to explore those territories with caution, with reverence, and with the understanding that the most fascinating discoveries are always waiting in the deepest shadows.